Hello and welcome to our show Health and Wellness, Facts and Myths. The pandemic has put a mental as well as physical health and wellness into sharp focus. Awareness of health issues is important for visibility and the community as well. As the Omicron variant now sweeps across the world and the number of cases start to go up, we are still not sure how it might change the course of the pandemic. People with chronic lifestyle conditions like diabetes, heart diseases should be extra careful about it. Declining physical activities, sleep disruptions, inadequate nutrition and increased substance use all have repercussions on emotional and physical well-being, especially in a young population. Awareness about such lifestyle disorders is important in a young population. Once you are aware of the risk factors, you can take right steps to reduce their impact. We have our panel of experts now to guide our youngsters about the management of lifestyle disorders. Joining us today is Dr. Ram Agarwal. He's a DNB, General Medicine Consultant Physician and Diabetologist in Pune. Also with us is Dr. Adil Majid. He's MD, DM Consultant Interventional Cardiology at the Dr. Adil Cardiology Clinic and Balaji Hospital in Jodhpur. Let me take the first question to Dr. Agarwal. Dr. Agarwal, the Omicron variant seems to produce milder symptoms, fewer hospitalizations as well, at least when you compare it to Delta. But the question is it because of the vaccine that we are seeing a less severe disease, or is it truly the variant itself? And how should people with diabetes who saw the maximum impact when it came to the Delta variant, during that time, during the second wave, ICUs were flooded with people who had diabetes. What is likely to be the impact on diabetics specifically when it comes to Omicron?
See, basically it is too early to comment as of now. But whatever patients we have been seeing in the OPD lately and whatever data we have from South Africa, UK and US, it all suggests that the new Omicron variant is less severe as compared to other variants in the past. And patients who are getting infected by this Omicron variant are requiring less hospitalization as compared to the second pandemic, which was due to the Delta variant. There are many epidemiological studies still underway to determine this phenomenon, that why the virus is less severe. So is it because of the mutations in the virus itself? Is it because of the vaccination, or there are some other factors involved in it? Preliminary data from the WHO suggests that Omicron variant is 5.4 times associated with higher risk of reinfection as compared to Delta variant. Talking about the patients with diabetes, definitely they need to be more cautious about this virus. They should prioritize all their health at any cost. They should keep their blood sugar levels under control, because if at all they get infected by this virus, if the sugar levels are under control, the chances of getting severe disease decreases drastically.
I see. All right, so you got to keep your diabetes in control, and also, if I can just add, always stay in touch with your doctor and understand from them how to actually go about this. Every individual and every diabetic is going to be different as well. Let me take the next question to Dr. Leem. Doc, what is a booster? If you could really spell it out for our viewers very simply, how does it help your body's immunity towards COVID-19? And what is the difference between a booster and a third dose? And will it really work against Omicron? We have different nomenclatures these days, Dr. Adil, when it comes to some, India is calling it a precautionary dose. There are other countries like Israel which has had 2 booster doses. Then there are doctors in UK, for example, who are saying that now 3 doses should actually become part of your vaccine routine, because that's just how we will be fighting the virus now.
Yeah, actually the booster means the longer protection, means because the boosters are needed when your actual immunity that is given by the vaccine to you, it starts fading. So booster is basically for a longer protection. So when the immunity starts fading, you need an extra dose of that vaccine to boost your immunity so that the protection lasts longer. And the third booster is basically for the individual any individual who is more than 18 years of age and who are at actually risk of getting the reinfection. And especially the healthcare workers, they can take the extra dose of this vaccine as a booster so they can boost up their immunity. Even the patients that are at risk of getting means immunosuppressed patients, they can actually get the booster. Then the third dose is basically for the individual with a weakened immune system, means their immune system is actually weak, so they need an extra protection for that. So basically these individuals are like the organ transplant recipients, then bone marrow transplant recipients, patients who are on immunosuppressive therapy for some other reason like organ transplant patients, then the patients who are on chronically on steroid therapy, then elderly patients with cancers. These patients are actually have a weakened immune system. So these patients, they need a third dose. In these patients, a third dose can be beneficial to enhance their immunity against a particular virus.
I see. Thanks for sort of stating that so simply for our viewers. Let me take the next question to Dr. Agarwal. Dr. Agarwal, some people are already suffering from a long COVID effect which still hasn't gone. How much these people are susceptible to Omicron now? What extra care do you think should people with the comorbid conditions actually be taking?
Okay. See, it is important to understand what is long COVID. Whenever any patient or any person gets infected with COVID virus, they usually show symptoms for the next 10 to 14 days, and then the symptoms subside. And then there are some patients who get severe disease in whom the symptoms can last for up to 6 weeks. And there is a certain subset of patients wherein the symptoms they last for more than 6 weeks. These patients are categorized under long COVID. But they need not worry, because with proper therapeutic agents and nutritional support, the symptoms usually subside. And definitely these patients have developed some natural immunity against the virus because of the antibodies produced after the infection. But we really don't know how long these antibodies will last and how well they are protected. So in these cases, vaccination remains a reliable option for them. And most effective steps an individual can take for the prevention of the spread of this virus remains the same, that is which we have been highlighting from the start of this pandemic, like maintaining social distancing, keeping a distance of 1 meter from the others, frequent hand washing and maintaining hand hygiene, wearing proper fitting mask, avoiding going to areas which are overcrowded or less ventilated, keeping their windows and doors open for good ventilation, and last but not the least, taking vaccination. And one more thing I would like to highlight is using of elbow or tissue paper while coughing or sneezing. And for patients with comorbid condition, as the Indian government has already approved a booster dose for them, they should take their booster dose immediately or whenever their turn is. And from today itself, our government has started the vaccination for teenagers also. So I would recommend them to go for the vaccine.
So teenagers begin their vaccination from today, and those with comorbidities actually begin from the 10th of January. So you can keep yourself updated and check the CoWIN application and the website actually if you want to get the latest on that matter. On long COVID, I want to get Dr. Adil's response as well. Are these patients who still have symptoms of COVID or long COVID, are there any way more vulnerable to the new variant? Is that something that can be concluded? Dr. Adil, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That question was for you, sir. Just want to understand from you in terms of long COVID, do you think people who are still recovering, who still have symptoms, say from the second wave, are they in any way more vulnerable to Omicron?
Yeah, actually the people who have the infection in the second wave, actually they are actually naturally protected, and the vaccine is also boosting their immunity. So there are less chances that they will get sick with this Omicron variant. So, but the patients who have got their immunity getting waned, so they are actually at the risk of getting the reinfection, and reinfection is usually of a lower virulence in these patients, and the infection is actually very mild in such cases because the immunity is natural also in these cases, and the natural immunity is always, it lasts longer in comparison to the vaccine induced immunity because it has got a widespread protection. So this is how the people who has got a the infection in the previous wave, they can actually slightly do better in comparison to people who doesn't have the infection.
I see. So it is people who did get a natural infection who are actually better protected, if one can actually say that, against the new Omicron variant as well. Let me go to Dr. Agarwal for the next question. Dr. Agarwal, what about seropositivity then? We saw seropositivity surveys done at large, considering the amount and the percentage of population who actually had COVID, even asymptomatically, especially cities and big hubs like Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, etc. All of these places, we saw a very high percentage of seropositivity. Would that cover natural infection? And then can we say that these people still have higher protection?
It totally depends on the antibody titer they have. Over a period of time, the antibody titer, it keeps on declining. That is why earlier there was only one dose of vaccination which was recommended, but then again WHO, it recommends taking the second dose. Now when we are in the third wave of pandemic, a booster dose is also recommended. So it totally depends on the amount of antibody titer one has in their body. So to boost that, we are giving vaccination to the patients. It doesn't totally depend on how often the patient or whether the patient has been infected or not.
I see. All right, let's shift our focus to children now, and since also teenagers, since they all begin their jabs in the country today. Dr. Adil, due to lockdown, screen time for children has increased with restrictions on going out as well. In fact, one of the things that we heard most from teenagers across the country all morning was that they have fear of needles, but they simply want to get their vaccine doses, fight it out, because they all want to go back to their friends, all want to go back to their classrooms as well. Another fallout of this has been, and sort of the restricted movement that children have had, is that they're getting mood swings as well. Depression, anxiety, several lifestyle diseases also becoming a cause of concern. Several of these kids, remember, still not have grieved through losses that they faced in their family. What is your advice to these kids?
Actually, the babies, the screen time has really increased. And the problem with the screen time is that the babies and the children, they actually develop their skills basically by human interaction. So human interaction should be there so they can develop their skills. And actually the screen time causes depression in children when they don't have the screen in front of them. They find different ways to entertain themselves, but the main way of entertainment for these type of children is the screen. So they always search out for the screen. Second, this screen time actually means their ability to concentrate on a particular thing, actually it hangs up. So the children actually, they don't concentrate. They are not able to concentrate when they are spending too much time on the screen. And third thing means they have an impulsive behavior, means they are not able to control their behavior properly. And when they don't, start shouting, they start fighting, and they don't find ways to entertain themselves. So actually it is my advice to all the parents that during the lockdown also, and even when they are at home, the children are not going to school, it is better to spend some quality time with the children by doing some kind of activity so that have actually a very less time for the screen. WHO also recommends that when you have a screen time for a baby of 0 to 2 years of age, the screen time should be 0. And for the children of 2 to 4 years of age, the screen time should be less than an hour. And for the children, teenagers up to 17 years of age, the screen time should be less than 2 to 4 hours. But nowadays the screen time has increased. So I request all the parents to spend some quality time with their kids so that the screen time can be reduced, and this long term, especially the problem related to their behavior, can be decreased remarkably.
In fact, screen time not an issue with kids alone and children alone. I think adults also need to get into some sort of strict routine on how much screen exposure do we really want, and it's a real cause of concern across the board. Well, on that note, we're going to slip into a break. When we come back, our chat with the experts will continue. Welcome back. You're watching Health and Wellness, Facts and Myths, and we've got a panel of experts for you to answer several questions. All right, let's take the next question to Dr. Agarwal. Dr. Agarwal, are there different treatment protocols for managing diabetes for young adults compared to, say, elders? This question even more relevant because post the second wave, we've seen a lot of new cases of diabetes actually crop up. A lot of people who had underlying diabetes have just realized that they have diabetes. A lot of people who underwent treatment and had to use steroids had to, stay with diabetes for a while now. So how does one manage, and is there a different protocol really for both?
Yeah, definitely the treatment protocol for managing diabetes in both the age groups is very different. So while managing diabetes, there are certain factors which we need to take care of. One is diet, other one is exercise, and third one is choosing the right therapeutic agent, oral or injectable. So when it comes to diet, elderly people, they have very unique challenges like altered taste perception, altered gastrointestinal function, compromised dentition, and memory impairment, which can lead to skipping of meals or skipping of medicines also. And that is why such patients, they require a very tailored diet plan. And these challenges are not seen in the younger age group. We can easily prescribe them a comprehensive diet plan. But the problem in the young age group lies with the compliance of the diet plan. Coming to exercise, elderly people or older adults, they have many functional disabilities because of the severe knee problems, spine problems, balance disorders, and sleep issues. That is why the which need to be done in such patients. And these problems are seldom seen in younger patients. Talking about choosing the right therapeutic agent, either an oral medicine or an injectable insulin, we need to be very cautious while choosing it because we need to prevent hypoglycemia, polypharmacy, and drug interaction in the elderly patients. Because hypoglycemic episodes can lead to traumatic falls or major cardiac events and lead to subsequent hospitalization. These problems are not seen in the younger generations. And yeah, younger population now has been diagnosed with diabetes because of the use of steroids during the COVID pandemic and because of excessive testing also. Because of COVID, they got their sugar levels tested.
I see. All right, let's take the next question now. It is observed that sudden cardiac deaths also occur often during physical activity such as playing a sport, during gymming, more often occurs in males than females. What are the causes of sudden cardiac deaths, Dr. Adil? Something that we saw a lot more in the past year. We saw young people die out of heart attacks. We saw many more attacks being reported. We saw some celebrities who, some of them died in their sleep, all young, very fit people.
Yeah, actually the sudden cardiac death and sudden cardiac arrest, these are the two entities. So the sudden cardiac death is especially more common in youngs and males, especially nowadays. And basically the commonest that we read and see is the coronary artery disease, which is a very common cause of death, sudden cardiac death. That is the heart attack, we commonly say. So coronary artery disease is one of the foremost important factors that needs to be considered when it comes to sudden cardiac death. Then especially in young athletes, if we talk about then hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a disorder in young athletes, which can actually lead to sudden cardiac death when they are actually playing in the fields. So then third thing, the presence of some familial cardiomyopathies, then some arrhythmic disorders, then some dilated cardiomyopathy, especially patients can have some kind of a ventricular arrhythmia, especially ventricular fibrillation, which can lead to sudden cardiac death. So, and in patients with also previous history of heart disease, they can have at risk of developing a sudden cardiac death. And the patients with a family history of cardiomyopathy, they are also at risk of sudden cardiac death. So these actually the pointers that we need to think where these causes should be kept in mind whenever a patient with sudden cardiac death or a sudden cardiac death survivor comes to us. And majority of the patients who are actually going for the exercise, especially the young individuals, when they are going for heavy exercise, especially into the gym or some kind of heavy sports activity they are planning to do, they should get their health checkup done with their cardiologist, because many of the patients who are sudden cardiac death survivors, when we asked them what were their symptoms, the chest pain and the presence of exertional dyspnea was the most commonest symptom. So if you have any athlete or any young male, if he develops some kind of a breathlessness or a chest pain during the time of exercise, then he should visit his cardiologist to get his evaluation done. And we have actually different protocols. The endurance training are there, then the resistance training are there for such individuals. And the training actually gives them the guide them to go in a right way so they can actually avoid sudden cardiac death. And sudden cardiac death actually, basically the patients are divided into 4 classes, means the patient with a cardiac disease, the class A, B, C, and D. So actually the B and C class patient means they have the disease and they have symptoms in the past also. They can actually go for the endurance training, so they can do some kind of a workout in which they can avoid such kind of disease, especially the sudden cardiac death.
All right, especially if you have some family history that runs, that is something that you need to get checked and need to be more careful about. Again, get in touch with your doctor. They understand best and they know best on how to proceed with this. Let me take the next question to Dr. Agarwal. Dr. Agarwal, type 2 diabetes is usually more commonly seen in middle-aged or older adults. But now there seems to be a rise in cases of diabetes in the younger population as well. We've spoken about some of them before the break, but could you talk to us about some of the factors contributing to the development of type 2 diabetes that we see more and more coming up and cropping up in young people?
Yes, definitely there is an increase in number of cases of diabetes in young population as compared to previous time. It is because of widespread poor lifestyle habits in this age group. India now ranks second in the world in number of diabetic cases, with overall almost 7.3 crores of the population having diabetes, and almost 30% of this population is young adults. There are many risk factors for this. Very commonly it is because of the family history, a strong family history wherein a parent has diabetes or a sibling has diabetes. Secondly, which we are seeing in the Indian population, is obesity or obese individuals or overweight individuals with a BMI of more than 25. Then we have female patients who had history of gestational diabetes, that means diabetes during their pregnancy, and then females who have history of polycystic ovary disease or who are having polycystic ovary disease now. And then the use of tobacco, use of alcohol, these are the factors contributing to the occurrence of diabetes in young patients. And some patients who have history of metabolic syndrome, which includes high blood pressure, high cholesterol levels, thyroid dysfunction, such patients are also prone to getting diabetes. And then in the past few years, past 2 years, because of the COVID lockdown, we have observed that everyone is working from home. So the physical activity has almost decreased drastically to almost to 20% of the routine physical activity. Screen time has increased in such population. Physical inactivity these days is #1 causative factor for the occurrence of diabetes in this young population.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, for that. Dr. Adil as well, thank you for taking all our questions this afternoon. That's it on the program. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.